another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I have a conversation with you about our thoughts and opinions on really, really important subjects that we need to talk more about. So this week, I'm joined by a group of women who all work in the domestic abuse arena in different roles, different capacities. But what I want to talk about is the dangers, in inverted commas, if there are dangers, of the film It Ends With Us, stroke the book. So there's a number of us that are here today. Some of us have just watched the film, some of us has just read the book, some of us has read the book and watched the film. But I just wanted to have a conversation around what people's thoughts, bearing in mind that this is our work, and what they got out of either reading the book or the film, and what the dangers are, or the messaging that can come across in films that are portraying trauma and or domestic abuse. Who wants to start? I guess the question would be, how many of you in the room have seen the film?
Yes, I have.
So three people. How many have read the book?
No.
So I read the book as well. How many have seen both the film and read the book? Yeah, so a couple of us have read the book. I have some thoughts. Some of them are good thoughts. Some of them are not so good thoughts around that particular film. And the reason why I'm picking out that film is that when the book came out, it was actually recommended in the office as a bit of a read before we kind of introduced that to clients. So there was a kind of a book review on it first, I guess. So I read the book as recommendation from somebody within the office. And I thought the book was extremely powerful. There was a lot of things that were in the book that really would resonate with what people would experience within those relationships. So I actually thought it was a really powerful book. I thought that it could be quite triggering for people, especially young people, because it was wide on TikTok, so it went viral on TikTok, and it then became global. And then the film, because of the actress, I believe, it's had a global impact, and that's what I wanted to kind of look at, because it has such an impact. Was it done well? Could it have done better? So yeah, talk to me. What were your thoughts?
I read the book quite a few, like a year or so ago, I guess, and my feeling from the book, I liked the book actually, and I thought it was really good that it was bringing up these topics, and because I think what the book and the film did that was good, I thought, was the love bombing aspect and those kinds of behaviours. So the showering them with gifts, that feeling wonderful and being kind of so quickly getting into a relationship. I thought it did that really well. And I liked the fact that the book raised an awareness about intimate partner abuse, the effects of domestic abuse as a young person within the home, and the impact that can have. I thought it did that really, really well. And I think also the film did that. And I also think, because we work in a domestic abuse field, what I feel disappointed me, and from what I can see from a lot of other domestic abuse kind of platforms, is that the biggest disappointment is the reality of the coming out of. I think that's where it shifted. Is at the beginning of the abuse, I think was okay. It was portrayed okay. It's all different for different people and different experiences. But what it showed was that, you know, was it Blake Lively? She was in a really privileged position in the film, of the fact that she had really good friends around her. She had her own business, and when she, you know, realised and finally got to the decision where she wanted to leave, she was in a position where she could just leave and go and live somewhere else. And that's not the case for a lot of people.
It's still not that simple though, is it? Emotionally, it's not a case of she can just leave and, you know, she has the wherewithal, but that doesn't mean that it's still not the same intense emotional struggle that it would be for someone else.
True. I think that's the, because there's the additional barriers in there, and I mean that's the other thing that the film didn't do, is that we know that when she finally got to that, I want to end the relationship, it showed 3 texts from him, and that's not that. When it's about that power and control, you know, at the end of a relationship where there's been abuse, for the victim, as it were, to say, I don't want this relationship anymore, it's never just 3 texts that you get back, because an abuser doesn't let you have the final word.
And what I thought wasn't portrayed as well, or made it look easy, was that she left him, found out she was pregnant, so he knew she was pregnant, and then invited him to the hospital, meet the baby, and then said, off you go. That, I can't imagine that happening. That would be, you know, that would literally escalate the abuse. He just seemed to go, okay, and off he toddled. Well, I don't know that that's very accurate of real life.
I think that it kind of tried to box it and package it in like this beginning, middle and end, and it doesn't work like that.
Can you imagine a perpetrator going to see his newborn baby, thinking, I think he was under the impression at that point that maybe there was a chance for the relationship, and then she just said, oh, by the way, you know, we're over, and he kind of just said okay and walked away sadly. I just cannot see.
No, and I think that there's a naivety in it as well, is that actually we know as professionals about post-separation abuse, particularly through children, and actually it doesn't just stop there just because somebody says no. And I think that my thoughts, where they are a little bit negative towards the film, and not, I have nothing personal against the actress, but from my, and this is my opinion, so sue me if you want, is that although she's an actress, I feel that she's an actress that has not gone through any trauma, because of the way that she has portrayed the trauma of a domestic abuse victim. And I think that the danger, and that's what I worry about, and that's why it's called The Dangers Of, and it ends with us, it could be any films that are portraying DA, is that it's not simple and it's not linear. And I worry that survivors that are in relationships, because we do know that survivors will watch programs, read books, go on TikTok, go on Facebook and start researching narcissism or gaslighting or love bombing. And there is a risk, I guess, of some people believing, okay, if I just say it, that's it, that it's just going to end. I don't know, that I was left with mixed feelings about the film. Yeah. But I agree with what you were saying. I think the book was extremely powerful, and actually the difference between the book and the film is that I guess that you have like budgets, you've only got a certain amount of time, I get all of that, and you can only capture a certain part of the story. But actually what the book does that the film doesn't is it does go on to show that post-separation abuse, the stalking, the harassment, and in the film, which I think they did it wrong, it seemed to be like a love story.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was a love story. Do you
and
know
it
what I
was
mean?
also quite a glamorous watch in terms of where they lived and the lifestyle they had, and it all looked lovely and easy.
Yeah.
And the love triangle thing was brought into it as well.
Yeah.
So the main focus wasn't on the domestic abuse, although that was obviously there, but it was kind of muddled up. And what also I found really interesting when I went to see it, I had a look around the cinema, whatever you call it, screen, and there were no men. It was all women in there. Not one
That's
male.
interesting, because I went together, and there was another couple, 2 other couples in there. It was a really empty cinema, but there was 2 other couples, and there was one guy on his own. So that's interesting. That was quite interesting to me, that kind of mix.
What saddened me about the whole thing is that Colleen Hoover, all her books, well, no, they're for a certain age range.
Yeah,
And
that's what I've heard.
when working with 16 to 24-year-olds, 16 to 19-year-olds, we know from statistics are the highest risk group to experience intimate partner abuse, and they're the lowest number that go and access service. And so I just think it's a real shame that she has such a reach with young people, and that film would have had such a reach with young people. My daughter went to see it, and my daughter's friends went to see it. They had such an opportunity there, and they will have done. All films do research through an organisation, and I know that in America, when they made the film, they did link up with the domestic abuse service, and there was resources which may have been more within America, but nothing. I didn't see anything over here. There was no pre-warning at the beginning of the film, other than this film contains. There was no highlight really in the awareness raising of the film. There was no helpline at the end of it. No go and if you've been affected by the. Do you know what I mean? That could have been
An opportunity.
and a marketing opportunity within the UK, and to have involved English, do you know what I mean, women's aid, refuge, whatever, do you know what I mean, national things, do you know what I mean, that the cinemas could have got in touch with local services. I just feel that it's such a missed.
I did see some of the press junket tours, and even the interviews seem to be a little tone deaf to the issue. One part of me was understanding what the actress was trying to get through, going, hey, I'm no longer going to be defined by the trauma in my life. I'm an independent woman, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But then the other part of it, there was the unspoken part that I think needed to be spoken about, if that makes any sense. I don't know, but I find that with anything that portrays DA is that the messaging is slightly off.
What do you mean?
Do you think because if a director, and it is generally down to the director because that's the way they want to do it, if you think if a director showed the true and honest nature of domestic abuse, that everyone would be horrified, and then therefore you wouldn't ever have a participation in the film. So you have to not make it too terrifying or not make it too real, because otherwise people would be like, one, they wouldn't believe it, because who would believe it, right? Unless you work in this industry and you hear those stories, a lot of people wouldn't believe the stuff that goes on, the stuff that never gets repeated, the stuff that real life is like. So if you did a film like that, no one would go and see it, would they? It's not entertainment then, is it? It borders on factual, doesn't it? And that's almost off-putting for people, because we don't want to believe that it goes on in our society.
But then every day we read the newspapers, we go on Instagram, we go on TikTok, and there's another story, there's another case, there's another this. So I think that the world is, if you like, waking up, that we've got some issues, but not at the stage of wanting to do an awful lot about it. And I think the film, It Ends With Us, was highly romanticised, in my opinion. And there is nothing romantic about abusive relationships, no matter how much you try and soften the blow.
I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, because I think when you're in it, you can interpret it as romanticism, that kind of intense, very intense. Well, there was a lot of intense physical connection between them, wasn't there? That kind of, the intensity of the love that's kind of shown to you, that feels very romantic, because we're fed that romantic story from young children. So that's the kind of almost romance that we expect to be swept off our feet. That's what we're taught from young. So I do think there's an element of romanticism. That's not to say, you know, there aren't all the other horrific things, but I think there can be that real intense feeling can be interpreted as if this is very romantic.
And that's the part of the cycle of abuse that keeps you in there, isn't
absolutely,
it?
and it doesn't necessarily, you know, maybe the sex was terrific. You know, he was a very good looking, the character in the film was good looking. He was a surgeon. You know, there's a lot of power and kudos attached to that. So I think there is an element of romanticism.
But it's interesting about those two characters, because if we really look at how they both met at a time of vulnerability or trauma. So she had just come from a funeral, her father's funeral. She had mixed feelings about that funeral. She had mixed feelings about her father because her father was abusive to her mother. And then him being this powerful surgeon had obviously had some trigger response to a child that has obviously reminded...
Killed, hadn't he?
Yeah, but he was triggered by the fact that he'd lost this child on the surgery board. So even at that moment, or surgery board, whatever it's called, ID board. No, like the
Can't that be terrible?
you know,
In the operating theatre.
in the operating theatre, thank you. But you know what I mean? Is that actually some of these relationships can be quite deliberate in timing, that there can be elements where, you know, a perpetrator will pounce on its prey at a very...
wasn't he?
Well, very
Really,
the first thing
immediately.
is like, let me have sex with you. Like, you know,
But
who says that on the
also-
phone? There was lots of red flags even in that first conversation.
But he did that thing, didn't he? That immediately he did that thing about, I'm not a relationship person. I'm not good in relationships. You know, saying it's almost becomes like a challenge.
Yeah.
Immediately he's this slightly out of reach challenge.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't do relationships, so this is just going to be like.
But also setting the expectations, going, this is what you're going to get from me.
Yeah.
You know, but then with the gaslighting and everything else and the love bombing, the girl, the woman, like every woman would be like, oh, he told me he weren't into relationships, and now look what he's doing. He's pursuing me.
Yeah.
And then when it starts becoming a little bit icky, a little bit, oh, that doesn't feel right. Actually, let me just remind you, I told you I don't do relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
I did think what I thought was quite well portrayed was that when it was shown from two different angles, wasn't it? I did really quite like that.
Yeah.
So observing it from the one side where it really came across, not for us because we work in the field, so we're quite... We're already very sort of switched on to it, maybe quite cynical about some things. But there was the side that, from his side, so it's like, oh, that was an accident. You know, he had this over the top response. He kind of pushed her or something away in a moment of kind of madness. So there was, and when she went down the stairs, we didn't really appreciate that at the time. And then I quite liked the fact that then she was thinking back and seeing it through her eyes and what really happened. I thought that was really clever.
Yeah.
And that there was a subtlety to the film.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was necessarily all bad. I completely get what you're saying about the ending and things. But there were some things that I think were quite well done, because domestic abuse, as we know, does look very differently in lots of different situations. Yeah. And sometimes I think there are situations like that. It's maybe not what we see every day, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to reach out to perhaps elements of the population that shows that actually domestic abuse can happen to those who are glamorous, in good jobs, have support, have money. Yeah. It cuts across everything. Yeah. So it didn't stereotype.
And I agree with that. And it's interesting what you say about, you know, seeing it from the other perspective, because I didn't actually really think about it from that angle. But yes, like, you know, when you're in the moment, you can easily minimise, which you saw, where, because he made it seem, you know, it wasn't a big thing. Yeah. And then when she had that moment of that little baby or whatever, she was confronted, going, oh, okay, now I've got to acknowledge that all is not what it seems.
The fact that he proposed to her like that at the birth of the sister's child.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, like making it all about him.
Yes.
And, you know, that was
Yeah.
hard for her if she was unsure.
Oh, totally.
She was swept away in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what a
Saying,
totally
yeah.
inappropriate moment. But that's
Yeah,
what
that's
perpetrators
what I mean,
do,
yeah.
don't they? You know, they choose when the focus is on somebody else. Let
Yeah.
me have the focus.
Yeah.
What can I do in that moment that the attention's back on me a little
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah.
And also, I thought it was quite good how the sister, when she found out that the injury, did he do that to you? I can't be your friend unless you leave him. You need to
Yeah.
leave him.
Yeah.
About her
Yeah.
own brother. That
Yes.
was, that was,
Yeah, absolutely.
I did like that part because it wasn't all bad. I didn't have all negative
No.
thoughts about it, but
No.
actually how many people are going to be on the side of
Of the victim.
you know of him.
Oh, right,
you know,
right,
do you know
yes.
what I mean? Like the sister wanting to stand by the brother and not acknowledging, hey, this is not okay. Like, because we see that every day, don't we? Like where the
No,
blame
but
is
she-
put
she
back on the
did.
victim.
She did.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm saying that
Oh,
as an
right, yeah.
example that not many people do
No,
that.
that's what.
No.
Yeah.
No.
You know, to be able to have that courage to say, no, that behaviour is not
It's
okay.
not okay,
And
yeah.
actually, I'm as your friend, I'm telling you this relationship is not okay for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
that
I
was
did
good.
I did like the concept of it ends with us.
Yeah.
Because we're always talking about trying to break the cycle,
Yeah.
aren't we? And that thing about, I'm looking at my new baby and I can't bear the thought that that's going to happen to this baby. So I need to end it now. I think is again quite an important message.
Yeah.
And
Because
that's what
most-
he said to her, wasn't it? Didn't he? She said to him, "What would you say to your daughter
Yes.
if she was in
Yes.
this position?"
Yeah.
And also, it's a case of what the mum would say, that she is allowing the daughter to grow up in what she knows is an abusive relationship, and for the daughter to perhaps end up thinking it's normal.
But
Yeah.
it's breaking
Like
that
she
generational
did,
pattern,
anyway.
isn't
Yeah.
it? Because her mum had gone through X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
She's then gone through X, Y, Z. She's now got this daughter,
Yeah.
and she's like, no,
Enough.
enough. Like, otherwise, so there's some strength and power in being able to break that cycle. And I totally agree. Sometimes it is us. It's our decision. We often think that we don't have a decision or a choice in those moments, but we absolutely do. And we might not think that we're making those kind of decisions. Oh, right, it's not going to be that bad or whatever. But actually acknowledging, I want something different. I want a different pattern for
It
my...
portrays that it is possible. I mean, I haven't read the book, so obviously, or that follow on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what was missing for me.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a bit
Yes.
too rosy at
Too
the end.
clean cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
I mean,
not
the
clean
moment-
cut, and I think that's the most important message, is that if somebody is watching that film, they're thinking about leaving, and they think that it's going to be that simple. I'm probably here to burst your bubble, because it's not to say don't leave. It's just not going to be as simple.
Not
As
everybody's
the
got a flower shop.
Yeah, and not everyone has got the resources to do so.
And
or...
she didn't seem to need any sort of professional support or
Yeah.
anything. She just did it all herself.
That we saw anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it is interesting because the director was actually a man. And when I was seeing some of his interviews of the press junkets, he was advocating very strongly, more so than the female actress, I've got to say, around the reasons and the important reasons of doing the film and giving a voice to the voiceless and giving, power back to people. And I did find that interesting, the dynamic of, hang on a minute, we've got a male director standing up talking about these really important issues, but we've got a female actress that's playing that part and not really focusing on that as the issue. Do you know what I mean? It was just an interesting dynamic that was going on there. I think it's interesting because even, there's 4 or 5 of us in the room, and, there's other DA organisations, there's other people, there's people that are not in this industry that have the same mixed feelings, and I think that having an opinion is good. I think having a discussion about it is good. Everybody's opinion is valued and respected and has the right. I think it's just an interesting topic.
Definitely.
Maybe they'll do a part 2 to the film.
Well, there is a second
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
There is a second book.
there?
Yeah, which so
It didn't end with us after all.
No, but it starts with us. So it actually focuses on
The daughter?
No, it starts with who's the guy? Atlas, the chefy guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's his story. So it actually starts. It's his story from his perspective.
I've got it. I haven't read it.
I think the book, but then I'm always an advocate that books are probably better than the films anyway, because it's like, you know, trying to encapsulate somebody's imagination through film. You know, whereas reading something, it can kind of take you down some alleys and through some windows and all sorts of stuff, whereas a film is very directive. No, this is what you're looking at, this is where you're going. Do you know what I mean? So I do think the book is probably more representative of highlighting relationships that are abusive, and definitely for that age range of like 19 to 24, I think the book is going to be more powerful than watching the film in being able to kind of highlight some of these
For
behaviours.
16-year-olds are reading it. That's
Yeah.
the thing, 15, 16-year-olds.
It was 15, wasn't it? The film was a 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.